Getting back to the root of the problem and where we're at. So, on average, could you tell me how much, like what percentage of the drugs are discounted or rebated? What percentage of all the drugs that you?
Yeah, that's part of the answer.
Is it 100%?
As Sarah said, it depends part on who you ask, but it also depends highly on what drug you're talking about. I'm hesitant to give you any kind of number specifically, just because it's hard to pin that down.
Is there any drug that you don't discount when you send it? When when you have that third party, any of them that you don't discount or have a coupon for? I mean, it seems like I go to buy a car and it's listed at $60,000, but I know I'm not going to pay. So it's again, you're getting back to that. Is there something that could be? I'm not advocating for the state to come in and dictate what prices are. But I am saying, at you as the manufacturer looking at it, saying, you know what, you could almost independently cut out that third party by just saying, hey, this is how much this drug is, period. Yeah. Without all that, the cost-benefit analysis of doing that would across the board at least get rid of one level.
Yeah, and I think what Sarah is about to say is that there aren't rebates and discounts on all drugs, and that's accurate. There are certain drugs that we don't discount as heavily as others. I mean, manufacturers make up for, discounts in certain places by charging the full price sometimes for a drug for a certain period of time. And again, I just want to reinforce that price only lasts until that drug goes generic or has a biosimilar competitor. So even when they are, asking for a full price of a drug, that's usually a time-limited option. And again, we're supportive of passing rebates and discounts along to patients. That was my #1 solution, and I believe that we should do that. You also mentioned, coupons and assistance. For drugs that we don't necessarily offer discounts or rebates on, I would say there's two things. First of all, people have insurance for a reason. They pay insurance premiums, or their employers oftentimes pay very high insurance premiums so they can get help with the cost of that drug. Second, I would just go back to the point that we offer free drugs, millions and millions of dollars in free drugs and copay assistance to patients. So I'd like to think there's a safety net for almost everyone out there. Sarah, I'm happy.
No, thank you. Stu, you hit on a really important point because the rebate and the gross to net bubble gets a lot of attention, and Antonio's done such great work on this in this area, but it's for select classes. And so we don't see a lot of rebating in oncology. We don't see a lot of rebating in sole source, and that usually is rare disorders where there's just one drug, because again, it's market forces. There's no market incentive for the manufacturer to offer a rebate for preferred formulary placement because there is no other option. And then in oncology, it's just patently unpopular to try to do any utilization management in oncology. And that's a reflection of a social value, honestly, right? We want the cancer patients to be able to get access to what they need. I did also want to mention, in case it didn't come through in my earlier testimony, when we do the analysis of whether or not the price is fair, we're using estimated net price. So we're trying to get through all of this talk of rebates and discounts and who's getting what. So we're able to actually look at the data that exist on the average discounts that are happening across payers, and oftentimes we're still seeing the prices are much higher than the clinical benefit patients are getting.
Can I ask one more? Antonio, did you have a?
Real quick, an overwhelming majority of the drugs are rebated in some way, shape, or form. As a precondition for a drug to be covered within the Medicaid programs, drug makers have to be volunteer to be part of the drug rebate program. So most of the drugs that are available in the marketplace are dispensed through Medicaid, and by virtue of that, they have to be giving rebates. So degree of rebate are very different from drug to drug, class to class, but most drugs do see some level of rebating and discounting.
Right, which goes back to if it's going to be rebated anyway, just putting that actual amount out, out of the gate. And one more question, Madam Chairman. So you said on average it's 10 years, $2.6 billion for a drug to come online on average. And what percentage of that is received from, I know like Pennsylvania, we give different grant dollars and academic dollars to different institutions, and you also have the NIH. Is that factoring in those dollars as well?
$2.6 billion, I'm not entirely sure if that includes NIH dollars. I don't believe it actually does. But I'm happy to talk a little bit about the NIH. You know, the NIH does very basic, important research. I don't believe they're part of that $2.6 billion. Okay. And they spend far, far less on R&D than we do. Our marketing budget, which I mentioned earlier, which is about $30 billion, is about what they spend. That's the entire NIH's budget. That's not even what they spend on drug development. That's their whole budget. We spend $90 billion. So just wanted to get that point out.
No, absolutely. The 2.6 billion is an estimate that comes from the Tufts Center for the Study of Drug Development, and that includes the outlay from the manufacturers themselves, including like a biotech company that invests it and then gets bought by a bigger company. They're factoring all of that in. It's important to note for any any economists in the room that a large portion of the 2.6 billion is actually what they call opportunity cost. It's the ability to not have invested some of the R&D money in another asset that might have been approved. And they claim that as part of the money that is spent to develop a new drug, because if you dedicate your resources to developing drug A and not drug B, you've missed potentially the possibility to have a great drug with drug B. So opportunity cost is in that 2.6 billion estimate, and so I think that's just an important caveat.
Thank you.
Antonia, did you want to reply to the question on research?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that just popped out at me was I've heard three big numbers today. One of them we had in our slides, which is the amount of rebates that are flowing through the system has now reached $166 billion. And then from the previous testimonies I heard, $90 billion is being spent on R&D, and another $30 billion is being spent on marketing. So literally, if you take all the R&D and the marketing and combine them, it's not nearly the amount of discounts that drug makers are passing through the system. That shows you just how significant that gap has become.